Tonight, back by popular demand, our viewers' favorite Manny Montenegrino, a feature-length conversation about the year in Canadian law and politics. It's December 29th, and this is the Ezra Levant Show.
Shame on you, you censorious thug.
Well, you know, we have fan favorites as guests here at Rebel News, and by that I mean people who, when they come on the show, people say, you should have them on more often. I loved it.
Oh, hey guys, sorry to interrupt. I bet this interruption from me is kind of annoying. I mean, frankly, I don't want to be here either. I loved the show you're watching, and I'd be slightly bothered having some journalist pop in to disrupt my viewing. So if you don't want this to ever happen to you again and just have me or somebody else show up in the middle of your show, please consider becoming a subscriber to Rebel News Plus, where you will get early and ad-free access to incredible premium Rebel News content just like this. It's easy and cheaper than Netflix. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com to join today. Thanks. And back to the show.
Of course, you know who I'm talking about. When I say fan favorite, I'm probably talking about my friend in Ottawa, Manny Montenegrino, who has had a very diverse career. He was in politics. He was in law. He was the manager of a major national law firm. He was Stephen Harper's lawyer. And he is a keen observer of all things political, but he doesn't just talk about politics. He understands the larger context and the legal context. One of my favorite guys. And he joins us now for a special in-depth interview. Manny, great to see you again. I tell you, clear the decks when Manny's around, because we're going to cover everything. We'll touch on politics and philosophy and history. When you look back at 2022, it was like we lived a decade in a year, didn't we?
Well, we did. I mean, the worst part of 2022, and Ezra, you know this of me, I was called to the bar just slightly before the adoption of the Charter of Rights. And so in the legal community, our generation are called charter babies, because
You're
we
BC,
were the first.
Before the charter. You were born in the bar 2 years BC or whatever it was.
Right. And it came just at the same time. So we were, as young lawyers, we were completely enthralled with the process, and we loved the idea of having individual rights above the state, much like, and I think America is the only country that truly has that. So we were very excited as lawyers who fight for individual rights to have the Charter of Rights in 1983 come to Canada. Now, there was some dilution to it. And some of us were upset that the notwithstanding clause was put in. That still allows Parliament the ability to override individual rights in very exceptional circumstances. And I can still hear Prime Minister Trudeau, not this one, the other one, Pierre Trudeau, and everyone else saying this notwithstanding clause will never be used. Only in the rarest circumstances will you trample rights. So we were all applauding it. And 2022, only almost 40 years after the Charter, I have never seen so many individual rights trampled upon time after time at the whim of this Justin Trudeau government. And I'm sure his father is spinning in his grave. He was a jurist. He understood individual rights. This Justin Trudeau, I don't think understands anything except, political correctness and just being a vacuous human being. But so here we have, 2022, what happened? Well, people lost their jobs, lost the ability to earn an income. People lost the ability to have governance over their own body, Section 7 of the Charter violation. People lost their mobility rights, Section 6 of the Charter. People lost, and there's the worst, and I believe this one to be the worst, and that is there are many public servants that sought an exemption, a religious or otherwise personal exemption from the vaccination. And they went before a star-channel tribunal to explain their religion and their religious belief. And some were peppered and questioned. Do you really believe that? That is a Section 2 violation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, imagine, Ezra, just imagine the concept that one is asked if they believe in what they truly believe in by people, and at the end of it, their job depends on it.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst that you would expect. I mean, go to Nazi Germany, where are you Jewish? And they're asked those questions.
Yeah.
I mean, your personal beliefs that should belong to you. That I remember as a young lawyer, never should the state ever be in the questioning of one's beliefs. I mean, if we did that, then truly everything is under attack. And these people had submitted before bureaucrats that really had no decision-making power, because someone above that, and they were questioned. Do you really have those beliefs? Tell us more. And why do you want exemption? And it's, what are your religious beliefs? I mean, that is circa 1920s. So talk about the crushing of individual rights. That was just the vaccines and protocol. Then you saw what happened with the convoy. I mean, that was in the use of the Emergency Act. Now, that Emergency Act is basically the new act of what was used, the War Measures Act. And I mean, think of the title, the War Measures Act. Those emergency powers will only exist in kind of time of war or unprecedented circumstances. Well, we used it over a peaceful protest. I live in Ottawa. There wasn't one crime, serious crime. There were no assaults. There was no damage to property. A lot of mischief charges, Ezra, mischief charges. And these people were at the wit's end with the violation of the rights of Canadians, and they came to Canada. So we used the Emergency Act. Again, a suspension of individual rights. And the worst, Ezra, at this time was co-opting banks to do the government's dirty crushing of individual rights. Imagine, Ezra, you or I could have given $20 to the cause of this liberation move or this rights return movement, and we would have had the state seizing our accounts, looking into us. I mean, this is, again, to a lawyer that's a charter baby, I would have never thought any of this remotely would happen in Canada. And but it has in a short, almost 2 generations, in short 40 years. Ezra, JFK once said that freedom and liberty is only 1 generation away from being lost. Well, in Canada, we're close to 2 generations away from being lost. And it happened in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Tell people the world's on fire. Identify the problem. Attack it. Non-stop. Wait for a friend. Maybe. Definitely not. Yep.
Chocka chip.
That's him. Kill the pipelines. The world's still on fire. Blame Alberta. Blame. Blame some more. Now the world's in need. Don't give them this. Or this. Take these. Screw that. Are we done? No. Finally, he's gone. Don't want you. I want you. But this is not good. Don't worry. We'll win. Destroying Canada's most conservative province. It's that easy.
So many things you mentioned there. I of course, went to law school probably about 15 years after you did. And the charter was treated as this sacred text. It has not been used to strike down any substantive public health order, curfew, flight ban, quarantine hotels, quarantine act, the kind of invasiveness of asking someone, do you really believe in that religion? Do you really? Imagine the government doing that. But, what strikes me is that, the pandemic happened in Wuhan in late 2019. In March 2020 is when they started declaring these emergencies and the lockdowns, just 2 weeks, by the way. So we're almost at 3 years in, Manny. Almost 3 years since the violations of our lives started. And it just blows me away that the Supreme Court of Canada has not yet heard a single case emanating from the lockdowns. They haven't, this vaunted Charter of Rights. It is as if the Supreme Court went on a Rip Van Winkle. They fell asleep for 3 years and they woke up and said, huh? What? Something went on? And they haven't had a single case. The only thing, and you correct me if I'm wrong on that, maybe I missed one. I don't think I did. The only thing the Supreme Court did was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court unilaterally declared that the Supreme Court building will have a vaccine mandate. And he announced that. So basically, where he stood. And every other judge knew where he stood. So they knew, okay, so if this goes all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, we know in advance that without any arguments on either side, without any facts, the boss of our courts just said he's all in favor of vax mandates because he's brought one in himself. Okay, now I know what to do. So not only has the Supreme Court not only not done anything, but it's telegraphed to anyone, don't bother with trials. I'll tell you right now, vax mandates are kosher.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, the committee investigating the convoy, just think of the madness, how it's almost dystopian. So just to bring some dates into being, December, January 2021, 2022, Ontario, and I think every other province, but I'm going to stick to Ontario because that's where I stand, locked down every citizen, vaccinated or unvaccinated. The Ontario data at that time showed that the vaccinated were spreading and getting infected at almost 40% higher than the unvaccinated on a per capita basis. These Ontario published numbers. And for that reason, it was important to lock down the vaccinated that were once going to vaccine passport protected places like restaurants and wherever they were. So Ontario was on a full lockdown because the vaccinated were spreading it more than the unvaccinated. And then 2 days or a few days after that, near the end, when everyone should have known by then, you're at home, you're a vaccinated person, and the government says stay home. Everyone should have known by then. I knew by April of 2021, when you look at the numbers in Israel, that the vaccinated, because they were 6 months ahead of Canada, the vaccinated were being infected and spreading it as much or more than the unvaccinated. But everyone, at least sitting at home, should have known that these vaccines do not stop infection, do not stop transmission. And what does Trudeau do weeks after that? Or I think it was the 15th of January, I forget the date, but put in a new mandate on our heroes, our truck drivers who stand alone in their trucks, who sit alone and bring us our food and bring us our supplies that we need tirelessly. So can you imagine at the end of the pandemic, when we all knew that the vaccines do not stop infection, do not stop transmission, he basically attacks the heroes. And I think, obviously there's no science behind it. There's no compassion behind it. There's no humanity behind it. It just has to be I think Trudeau wants to know, how far can I take my powers? So all he does, he strips these people of their jobs. They motivate them so much that they spend thousands of dollars coming to Ottawa, and 80% of the people in Ottawa in their trucks were vaccinated. They understood the science. Why are you doing this to these unvaccinated? And during the hearing, I watched parts of it. This is a year later.
Yeah.
And no one at the trial, no one said, hey, wait a minute. There was no health reason to bring this mandate that caused these people to get in their trucks. The issue is settled, Ezra. at least in September, the CDC said there's no difference between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. By now, by the time of the hearing, I mean, Ezra, from a legal point of view, it's almost like a trial was happening and they said, well, we don't care about the self-defense argument. We don't care about the guy breaking into his home, and that's why we shot him. Let's just talk about why you had the gun and why you shot the person, and we don't care about the law of self-defense. This is why you acted. These men and women, and got in their trucks because they were acting in self-defense. Mm-hmm. And the evidence is clear about any of that.
Self-defense. I love that analogy. By the way, the New York Supreme Court threw out their vaccine mandates and ordered the state to rehire those that were fired. Right. And they specifically cited that there is now proof that the vaccines do not stop transmission. And if you ask public health officials, Dr. Fauci, Albert Bourla, the head of Pfizer, they say, oh, no, we never said they stopped transmission. Right. Well, of course they did say that. That's the whole rationale for forcing someone else other than yourself to have the vaccine. Like if you want a vaccine, take it. That's the libertarian mindset. How can you force your neighbor to do so? Well, the false rationale was because he will transmit it to me, which doesn't really make sense if you think it's safe for you. But now it is established law and established science that the vaccines do not stop transmission. So the whole vaccine passport, vaccine mandate business had no factual underpinning. And I bet you most people in public health, most people in law and politics in the establishment haven't really processed that because they just know they're on team vaccine, team Pfizer, team Trudeau. Right.
It's amazing. So Ezra, so you look back in 2022, me as again, I go back to the charter baby. It was, I'm still shaking over what happened to the Canadian people. How could this happen with this wonderful document, these wonderful protections? So 2022 and 2021, but 2022 predominantly, was a great legal letdown. But there's also another trauma that happened, not to the legal community, not to the rights of law, but to our I'll call our medical profession. I mean, the biggest, I'll talk personally, and I know many that feel this way. I had an absolute trust of our medical system. Mm-hmm. I had an absolute trust of my doctor. I had trust that Health Canada was going through everything carefully about every drug that has been submitted and everything carefully reviewed for the protection of citizens. Well, we watched it's almost in front of us. We watched that there was corruption. There was really no tests of transmission. There was no test of infection. There was a lot of hiding. And everyone in the medical community rallied around one thought. The whole concept of the oath, Hippocratic oath, is do no harm. We did much more harm, and now they're agreeing to it. We did much more harm to kids by closures and so on. So I look at, and I ask the question, and we know that no one looked at the test data, and it was hidden by these large pharmaceutical companies to see if what their claims were true. No one looked at it. And now I ask myself, how can I trust any doctor who says, take this medicine, this vaccine, when I said, wait a minute, I watched it. I watched the sausages being made. And I have no trust in any of this now. And that, to me, every doctor has a big job to do. And that is, why weren't you there protecting the Hippocratic Oath? Why weren't you there protecting the trust in doctors? And I say the same thing to lawyers. I mean, so not only did lawyers fail, my profession, but did doctors fail themselves? Like I talk to many people that have had a complete 180. I don't trust what the doctor says now because they didn't speak up. Where were the cardiologists Where were so there's 2022. I mean, if you wrap it up, there is the biggest debt added to Canada's history that causes hyperinflation. We've destroyed supply chains. So economically is probably one of the worst things that happened. What happened to legal and then human rights, the worst thing that ever happened. Whatever happened to, the doctor's trust. Can you imagine undermining medicine and undermining Health Canada? Do I trust Health Canada? I did. I don't. It's that simple because I watched it.
Well, the remains of 215 children have been found in a mass grave in Canada.
Many of you know that just over a year ago, the discovery of the remains of 215 children was found at the Kamloops Indian Residential School at the Tecumseh First Nation. But what if I were to show you that what I just said wasn't true, and that in fact, a year later, not a single body has been found?
This mass grave is a painful reminder of the genocide.
Canada's leaders aren't condemning the burning of churches. No, they're endorsing the burning of churches.
A juvenile rib bone that surfaced in the same area.
You'd be surprised the number of people who say, I'm a doctor, I'm a paramedic. This is definitely a human bone, and it's definitely not.
Looks like the chief.
It is.
Could be you.
You're so right. And those few doctors who did stand up with a second opinion were hounded, prosecuted, suspended from practicing. Well, here, let me ask you this, because you and I have learned so much, and we were skeptics by nature, and we're skeptics of big government, but let me put a few facts to you that are troubling. Justin Trudeau won re-election a year ago. He just did. And you could say that his election platform was go harder against the unvaxxed. Lock down harder, vaccinate harder.
No, Ezra, I'm going to change this because I actually know what happened. But he basically said, hey, you guys who were vaccinated, you did the right thing. You're the 70, 80%. He pitted the 70, 80% against the 20 or 30 at that time. That's a clear win. Mathematically, you're on the right side. And then he said, because you did all this, we're going to punish the people that didn't. And illegally, not only punish them that has no basis in science, because by April, we knew that there were just a few breakthrough cases. We knew that Israel's on its third dose and the vaccinated were getting. We knew the science wasn't there, although they hid it. We knew the law, and that is we had a Charter of Rights. No way should you assault that. But it's very easy, Ezra. I watched this series on Netflix called Tyrants, and it's very easy. It's very easy in politics. You simply pick one group that's a majority and you go after the minority and you're going to win. And I've seen this in my lifetime, whether these preacher politicians were going after the gay community back in the 60s and the 70s. It's easy because a majority will always trample on them, and it's an easy political win. That's what Trudeau's strategy was. It was, I'm going to reward you. Because you know why I'm going to reward you? Because the vaccines didn't work. You're still getting COVID. You got it for nothing. You try to protect your community, but at least we can punish the unvaccinated. That's your reward. Yeah. You're not being punished. And you know what, Ezra? 2 Quebec MPs, and you know this, courageous Quebec MPs said it was a strategy, a political strategy. It got media for about one day, and they were shooed away. Yeah. It was a strategy to pit the honest minority, the patriot minority against the majority, and the majority got their, and they felt good because when you close a restaurant in September or when you lose a job, I didn't lose my job because of a vaccine. I voted for the right guy. I did the right thing and punish these people. Yeah. Just abhorrent. It's abhorrent.
Well, that's a terrifying way to look at it, and you're so right. And it wasn't just Trudeau, by the way. British Columbia, the premier there was reelected. Ontario's premier was reelected, and he had a brutal lockdown. Quebec actually had curfews. and the premier there was elected very strongly. You know, after a great division in society, like I remember in South Africa, after decades of apartheid, they had something they called the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. Now, they did a similar thing in Canada on Indigenous issues. And the whole idea is, let's actually try and find some common ground morally. We're not necessarily going to prosecute people or jail people or condemn people. Can we just air out the facts and try and get along, because we've got to live with each other? That's how it was in post-apartheid South Africa. And there was something similar after the Nazis were defeated. There was a denazification. After the Soviet Empire fell, even in Iraq, after Saddam Hussein, they had something called de-Baathification. Baath was the name of the political party. In Poland and Germany and Czechoslovakia and Hungary, after the Soviet regime, those countries had to live with themselves and with each other. And they went through this process of airing things out and trying to build a common view again. And I don't think that's happened in Canada. I think that we're still pitted against each other. Trudeau got away with it. There was no truth and reconciliation. And as you say, he deliberately exacerbated the differences because he thought, well, I'll take the bigger percentage and just win.
Ezra, he called the unvaccinated bigots, misogynists, racists, people with views that shouldn't belong. This was at the time when the science was clear that the unvaccinated were correct. One thing that Trudeau does understand, he does understand pitting the majority against minority, and he does understand. And so it continues to this day. Ezra, all that has to happen. Listen, here's the problem, Ezra. It isn't about the examples that you gave. The problem is that the media is on that side as well. The media is on that side, and they are still doing substantial narratives to protect it. What you need is a full, honest approach as to what was the science. And yeah, you know what? We got it wrong. But that's what has to happen. I mean, the big pharmaceutical companies are spending a fortune on media. So they have a vested interest to continue with it. I mean, I've never seen more it seems to me that the deeper that Pfizer paints itself into a corner, and I wish I was 30 years old and back in my legal career, because that would be a wonderful class action lawsuit. But the more they're in the corner, they understand the more that they have to pay out. I've never seen more Pfizer ads, if you notice. I mean, not of the vaccine, other products. So they're just, and that buys the media and keeps it quiet for a few years. But really, this isn't what we've seen with Africa and South Africa. This is a decision that was based on science. These are people in the same family. This isn't a black person versus a white person and all the ignorance and bigotry that belongs there. This is brother and sister of the same family that are not talking to each other because the science was lied to them by the government. So, these aren't different people or different races or different cultures. They're from the same bloody family. And all we need to help these families is by the media saying the truth. We got it wrong. We were wrong. We shouldn't have implemented this. These unvaccinated understood it better than we did. They were courageous. Let's unify families first. Let's unify communities and then unify the country under science, not because we now are understand. So this is the troubling part. I understand racism. I mean, I'm an immigrant. I understand the unknowns, what was happening in South Africa or Germany and all that racism. But this is discrimination was based on a lie, on science that was untrue. That should be fixed in a minute.
Let me shift gears a little bit because we've talked a lot about the pandemic and the vaccine rules and the convoy and Trudeau and the polarization. And you're right. He absolutely leaned into division. That's how he won it. How about Canada's place in the world? I remember when Trudeau won after Harper in 2015. And the Liberals said, oh, we will be respected on the world stage again. We won't have this doctrinaire guy who doesn't get it. Stephen Harper doesn't get it. I think Stephen Harper had a very strong foreign policy. I think Canada was truly a leader, a moral leader. Harper warmed up relations with India, which I think is very important. Even though Barack Obama was president at the same time, Harper and Obama got along pretty well. In fact, it wasn't until Trudeau won the election that Obama actually killed the Keystone XL pipeline. Obama didn't do that until Harper was gone, despite all the disagreements. But the left likes to fancy themselves great masters of the arts of the great game, and they haven't been. What do you think about Canada's place in the world? I think a lot of people should have been disabused of things when Canada lost the UN Security Council vote. Not that that vote means anything, but it is a barometer of how other countries' governments view you. What has Trudeau done to Canada on the world stage, not just in the last year, but I guess in the last 7 years?
Well, that's a good question. I have to go back in my 50 years of observing this and say, what does Canada mean to the world? And for the longest time, and here's the answer, Ezra. We can't, I'm an immigrant to this country. It's a great country. And boy, did I come to a great place. This country, this young country, not even a dominion, put more men at risk to fight for freedom and liberties in this First and Second World War. Canada was to the world toe to toe as strong as America in its ability to fight and spread human rights around the world. That's who we, I mean, if I had to say what's most defining definition or value of Canada, we are the individual rights champions around the world. Obviously, America is more than we, because it's clout and its ability. In Hong Kong, when they were lost their rights and China took over, they were flying the American flag. But Canada was a close second. So that to me, now what Trudeau understood this, because Prime Minister Harper did a great job on that. And Trudeau understood it. And if you might remember, early in his career, Trudeau tried to be the champion of individual rights. And so what did he do? He kind of, even before he was elected, gave a compassionate view of the Boston bomber. Remember that, Ezra?
Yeah.
And he basically said, well, where did he come from? Because we Canadians understand individual rights. Then he went on, and the Omar Khadr, which is a complete abomination from a legal point of view. But there he is. He picks the kind of the most trampled case of individual rights and said, this person who agreed that he committed murder still has rights. And that's a champion cause of Canada. Then he picked a fight with Saudi Arabia and the Ralph Bawaldi case, where he basically called for his freedom, this journalist who's in jail. And he wanted Canada, he wanted to do better than Harper in the sense that Canada was a place where individual rights were of great value. So those three, but what really happened? I'm going to tell you something. I know Stephen Harper. He truly believes in his core individual rights. You can tell that Justin Trudeau does not believe in it, because what we saw in 2022 with using the Emergency Act on truckers clearly tells me that he's more of an autocratic dictator. He doesn't understand individual rights. If it was in your soul, you would have not called for that. Yeah. If it was in your soul, you would have not fired people. You would have just resisted. You would have let them test or whatever you want to do. But no. So if you ask me that broad question, we're a mockery around the world on individual rights now because of the truckers, because of the mandates. And so we've lost, I mean, what are we to the world? We're much less than we were before.
What we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, that we penetrate the cabinets.
Now, who could represent such a world better than you, Prime Minister?
Building back better.
To do things differently. To build back better.
I plan to build back better.
It is called the Great Reset.
They predicted an overpopulation crisis in the 1960s, mass starvation in the 70s, and an end of oil.
We need all the leading companies to come into First Movers, and then we have to fund projects starting actually literally this year.
By hacking organisms, elites may gain the power to re-engineer the future of life itself.
We know now that the next crisis is already waiting for us around the corner.
And I just think of China, how Trudeau sucks up to China so badly. But I don't know if you remember this little interaction where Xi Jinping gave Trudeau a little dressing down, like a boss would berate an employee. Here's a little clip from their recent meeting in Asia. Take a look.
Everything we discuss is then leaked to the paper. That's not appropriate. And that's not how the way the conversation was conducted. If there is sincerity on your part,
free and open and frank dialogue, and that is what we will continue to have. We will continue to look to work constructively together, but there will be things we will disagree on, and we will have to continue.
Let's create the conditions first.
By the way, I like it when Canada and China are at odds politically and diplomatically. I think we've been too subservient. Trouble is, Canada is still completely subservient. I mean, the RCMP was just found to be giving secure communications contracts to China. There are Chinese police stations in Canada. So, I mean, for even though Trudeau sucks up like crazy, he's still berated by the Chinese dictators. Quite something. Well, look, Manny, 2022 was the best of times and the worst of times. It was the darkest moments of the lockdown, the flight ban, the martial law, but it was also a moment of courage where ordinary Canadians, working class people mainly, stood up and said enough and actually began to set us free. So I saw the best and the worst in 2022. If I had to ask you to make a prediction about 2023, and it's always hard, predictions about the future are a lot harder than predictions about the past. What do you think, what is something to watch for in 2023? Is there something that you're hopeful about, or is there something that you're trepidatious about?
I'm actually moving towards more trepidation. I think there is a generation that doesn't understand values. In individual rights and freedoms and privacy. I think the test, what I saw with the vaccine mandates and the trucker, all that stuff is set aside is how much will the populace subvert to the state. And once you break that, and once they've done it Ezra, let me put it very clearly. Once you've given up your body, your autonomy to your body to the state, you're done. And I think we're going to see much worse. We're going to see, financial autonomy. We're going to see much worse. The fact that I didn't see a bunch of doctors and a bunch of lawyers and a bunch of people saying, stop, this is the wrong direction. This is against what Canada stands for. I mean, listen, it's okay to be another country. It's okay to be Cuba and North Korea and China. But Canada had its own place and its own definition. You want to change it, go ahead. The populace will change it. That's what I think is happening. Because it took truck drivers who I respect immensely, for them to say, we are the residual part of what Canada truly needs. And to see that is frightening, because I think once you've given up, so when you ask me for 2023, I mean, I think an election's coming. How do I know that? Well, 2019, Trudeau paid a bunch of money to media companies to win the election. Now we're changing social media laws so you can ban me and other people more, and so that helps him. So I think that's a setup for an election that's coming up. I think Canadians, well, we're not teaching how terrible it could become, and even with examples of what's happening in Europe. I mean, there's two places you can get your information from. China, you see what's happening. Oh yeah, but that will never happen in Canada. Well, it's happening. But go to Europe, where they really lost their own autonomy over their own energy. I mean, there are people that I know that are cutting down trees to get through the wintertime. It's just like, how much can you allow the state to infringe on your life? And so I think 2022 was the big test. And the big test is, did we break the spine of people who understand autonomy, who understand freedom, and they passed that test. They passed it. And so there's a few of us left. And I don't know. I think Canada is going to keep going on this slippery slope. Maybe with a change of government, and maybe by hearing it, but we need the media on side, and the media kind of likes, I mean, it's kind of neat. Eh? I mean, the media has its people in control. So why would they want to give that up? I mean, so my team's in, I mean, we saw that with Twitter. I mean, that's not even in the news, that the bombshell that Twitter was co-opted by the government to give this particular point of view. I mean, that's frightening. No, it's okay.
Well, I hope we find out what Canadian government officials were meddling with Twitter in Canada, because I'm most certain that why wouldn't it happen up here? The Canadian Liberal Party and the U.S. Democrat Party are in lockstep on their campaign tactics. And I'm quite sure that if we ever see the truth, we'll see that the government tried to get, for example, Rebel News censored and throttled. Well, Manny, it's great to catch up with you. I think you're right. I wonder when an election is coming. 2023 would seem to be in the rhythm of this government. They had one in 2019, then 2021. I just think if the economy slows down, I don't know if Trudeau will want to go to the polls in the middle of that, but we'll find out. And I'll tell you one thing. As you know, we are journalists who are not on the payroll of Trudeau, and it'll fall to us to tell the other side of the story. You know we will. Manny, great to catch up with you. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
No problem. Merry Christmas to you and your staff, and continue doing the great work that you do. I'll tell you something. When we lose a rebel, we're faster and closer to that, the loss of our individual rights. So, keep hanging in and doing what you do.
Will do, my friend. Thanks very much. There you have it. Manny Montenegrino, the CEO of Think Sharp, who joined us today via Skype from Ottawa. Well, that's our show for today. Until next time, on behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters, to you at home, good night, and keep fighting for freedom.